Now, France awaits a key constitutional council verdict on the controversial pension reform, as the streets in France are packed with security personnel and protesters. Armed police has been deployed outside France's constitutional council. President Emmanuel Macron wants the French to work longer so that he can save billions of euros of the pension budget by the end of the decade. According to reports, the council will support the government's plan and believes that it is in line with the constitution. The verdict is expected around 4:30 p.m. GMT or 10 p.m. India time. Once the council gives the green light, the retirement age in France will increase by 2 years from 62 to 64. On Thursday, which was the 12th day of nationwide strike in France, there was mayhem, ruckus and anger unfolding on the streets of Paris. Tens of thousands of protesters marched onto the French capital, with some clashing with the police. Authorities had a tough time managing the crowds and resorted to firing tear gas shells to disperse them. Scores of French workers stormed into the Paris headquarters of Louis Vuitton as well. They called for the rich to contribute more to financing the state pension. While many opened flare smoke inside the building, others were seen waving flags of the Railway Workers' Union. Now, it is also a political test for the incumbent president, as thousands of people are expected to hit the streets as a last bid against the reform. Now, for more on this, our correspondent Ollie Barrett is joining us live from Paris. Welcome to the broadcast. Chaos and more clashes are expected on the streets of Paris today. How do you see this last-ditch effort playing out?
Well, it very much depends on the decision of the Constitutional Court later. There are various options in terms of how the court's decision-making could play out. We actually expect that decision will come down at around 6 p.m. local time now, which is in 4.5 hours or so from now. And the options for the Constitutional Court include blocking President Macron's proposed reforms entirely, saying that they are not appropriate. The other is that they could effectively approve them in their entirety and say that they are appropriate to go ahead. Many experts feel that the more likely scenario is somewhere in between, that the Constitutional Court may well say that the government can move forward with raising the retirement age, but that other elements of the plans of the proposals shouldn't go ahead. So that will then feed into, I think, the reaction that we see here in Paris and in other French cities, the scale of protests and demonstrations that we may well see. We know that protesters plan to be on the streets here in Paris later today. Authorities have effectively banned protesters from being very close to the Constitutional Court, but that probably means that we'll see them elsewhere in the city, and it may well be that some of the so-called casseurs do try and cause trouble around the Constitutional Court later on. This is a huge moment for Emmanuel Macron and for his government and for his proposed reforms to the pension system. He insists it's necessary. Never give up, he has said today on a separate visit to Notre Dame Cathedral here in the French capital, signalling that he believes that he is going to try and continue with these reforms. And as I say, a huge amount rests now on the Constitutional Court and the decision that it takes later on.
Right now, experts are saying that the council is likely to give a green light, but as you said, we will wait and see how that pans out. But the fact that the French Prime Minister deployed constitutional power to force passage of this bill, many protesters have called this undemocratic. I want to ask you, how are the other European powers seeing this?
The other European powers are looking on with interest. Many European countries have a higher retirement age than France already, and many by several years. The French protests have been interesting to watch, therefore, for other European countries. Going back to your point about the Constitutional Council and how some experts believe that they might green light the proposals, as I was saying, I think what most experts believe is that the overall proposal for the French government to raise the retirement age may well go through, but that the Constitutional Council may well object to some of the other elements of the plan. In some ways, that is being seen as not a bad scenario for Emmanuel Macron, because it wouldn't be a complete victory for him, but it would mean that the key plank of his reforms would be something that he could move forward with. If we did end up in that scenario, we expect that the government would probably try and sign that legislation in the next week or so. We would probably see Emmanuel Macron in some kind of address to the nation next week. We would probably see Emmanuel Macron engaging with the unions in discussions about the next steps, and we may well see Emmanuel Macron embarking on some kind of tour of the country to try again to sell his proposals to the French people. There has been huge anger in many quarters about the proposals, about the proposed raising of the retirement age, about the proposed further years of work that French workers would have to put in to qualify for the full state pension. At the same time, the government is saying it is simply not sustainable for the status quo to remain. Emmanuel Macron's been throwing ahead to the next decade or so, and has been saying once we get to that point, if we don't make changes, the pension system is going to be in deficit of billions and billions of euros each year if changes aren't made.
All right, Holly, thank you for getting us up to speed with what is unfolding in Paris.